Jennifer, welcome to Adulting with Autism.
Thank you so much for having me.
For all my listeners new to Jennifer, who are you?
So interesting. No, not really. My name is Jennifer Dantzler, and I'm the executive director and founder of Inspire ND, which is a Houston based nonprofit whose mission is to create inclusive communities for people with neurodiversity through education and engagement. I founded the nonprofit a little over 23 years ago. I'm a board certified behavior analyst and the founder of my nonprofit.
So you say like lasting change doesn't happen by asking neurodivergent people to fit in the world. So what would that mean in everyday terms?
Well, what that means is that we all think and learn differently and interact differently, and we tend to create boxes and one way of doing thing, my way or the highway. And I think for us as a society, we it's time for us to go deeper than just here's the process, here's this community event. Like, what do we really need to do to be an inclusive community? What do we really need to do to create supports for people who have sensory overload? What do we need to do for people who have visual overload and need more processes and systems? And so, to go deeper, we really need to just truly understand what neurodiversity is, and really make systemic change.
So I know like people say inclusion and it's a new buzz term. How do you distinguish like genuine inclusion from like good intentions or awareness?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I know there are a lot of well intentioned community organizations out there that will do like sensory friendly nights. And then when you dig deeper, they're not really sensory friendly. Maybe they turned the music down a little bit in the restaurant or turned up the lights in a theater production, but it's not really what inclusion is about. I know recently, in the past year or so, the Houston theater companies have all come together and created initiatives that's really about systemic inclusion, meaning they don't have sensory friendly films. They train all of their staff to understand people with neurodiversity so that at any given performance, if someone wants to wear their headphones or is having a struggle in a moment, all the people who work there or volunteers know what to do. It's not just a sensory friendly one time event. So, I do think there are a lot of people who want to do right by people with neurodiversity. Um, but I would say we're still a little surface level, and we really need to go deeper. We need our neurodiverse voices to speak up and say, this is what I need. We need self advocates to be out there and really advocate because we can't we can't fix things if we don't know what we need to fix, right? So yeah, it's really just about going deeper.
When you made your like nonprofit, what did you like begin noticing as like children and families you serve like grew older?
Yeah, so it was interesting when I first started my nonprofit over 2 decades ago. Autism specifically was at a much less frequent rate, I guess you could say, right? About 1 in 250 kids. And really, the term neurodiverse was rarely heard, right? It was very distinctly autism, ADD, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and they were all sort of in these separate buckets. And what we started our nonprofit to do early intervention, to help children learn how to be included in the community. Then over time, what I realized is that every time, and our mission of our nonprofit, even for early intervention, was community inclusion. It does not matter if we can teach them a skill, if they can't do it at the restaurant or in their preschool or kindergarten class or at the mall or, be safe in any kind of parking lot. It just doesn't matter, if they can only do it in a very protected environment. So one thing we found though, as we were taking our kids in the community, we found more and more people wanting to learn from us. And, all of a sudden, because initially, when we would take, say, an adolescent to Subway and they would order food, if the Subway person didn't understand them, they would turn to the caregiver and say, what'd they say? And I would teach my people to say, ask them again, right? Like, that kind of thing. And so, I think over time, what we've seen is that, um, we sort of are doing this classic, like, let's teach the person how to adapt to society. But we really need to do is teach society on how to adapt really to everyone, right? To all of us. And so I think for our families, hopefully what they're seeing more now over time is when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the restaurant, when they go to the gymnastics class, they're seeing more people who have various needs. And so hopefully they're seeing more supports out there in the community.
What are like the biggest service cliffs you notice when neurodivergent kids are now transitioning into adulthood?
Yeah, so, they literally call it the cliff at age 22 because
Right.
that's when public school stops. And, for our families who haven't really intentionally focused on transitioning into adolescence, kind of going back to the previous question, for our families of our children transitioning to adolescence, there really needs to be a shift in mindset about, first of all, are we working on the right things? Are we working on safety skills? Are we working on independent skills? Are we working on quality of life skills, right? And then for that family that wasn't really intentional about what happens at 22, there's literally they graduate or whatever, they get their diploma or their certificate from high school, and then there's nothing. And the problem is, like in the state of Texas, and as in most states, there is a Medicaid waiver, right? If you turn 18, the person is eligible. But in the state of Texas, there's a 20 to 22-year wait list, right? So if a parent, when their child was diagnosed at the age of 3, didn't get on the wait list because they were dealing with the 10,000 other things that you have to deal with when a child is first diagnosed. And many of, I can't tell you how many families I talked to that at age 15 or 16, like they're just now learning about this Medicaid waiver wait list. And so I say to the families, still get on it because it is for lifelong care when you're eligible, right? So, still get on it because even if you don't access it, till your son or daughter or you are 30 or 35, it's still worth it to get on it. But the problem is we're not teaching enough at the adolescent age about what our people need to be safe later and to have really how to access quality of life. Number one thing. And so, for our families, it's like the future is going to come. We can't stop time. So we can either plan for it or not. And I know it's really hard to be intentional about planning for it, but it's going to happen either way. Right. So
Right.
we need to not keep our head in the ground and we really need to work on some of the hard things.
Like you partner with employers, schools, first responders. What are examples of small changes that they can make to help young adults kind of navigate into this mess we call adulthood?
Yeah, it is a mess for all of us, right? The number one thing I would say is write your processes down. Most of us are not auditory learners, and many businesses, companies, restaurants will have that 10-minute stand up meeting in the morning to give announcements for the day, and it'll all be oral, right? And auditory. And so for our visual learners, for our people who need processes and systems, if they're not diligently trying to take notes or process what was said, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And so, like in every business, in every school, I know teachers have gotten so much training over this over the recent years of put up on the board exactly what your expectations are. Put up on the board what the homework is. Put up on the board steps 1, 2 of 3 when you walk into a classroom, right? So, but for anyone, you'd be astounded as how many businesses I work with that when I ask them, they don't even have job descriptions for their other employees. I'm like, well, then how are they supposed to know what they're supposed to be doing every day? So let's start there. Let's just literally write out job descriptions and scope of your work to make it clear for everyone, not just our neurodivergent individuals.
So, what can a manager do before an employee requests accommodations to make sure it's clear, safe, and easy to navigate?
Well, really, it's about asking the right questions, right? So it's about, what kind of environment do you work best in? What do you find to be stressful in an environment? Do you find noise stressful for you? Asking the questions that, and they have to be genuine, like they really, the manager needs to want to know, is this stressful, is this too much for you, asking questions like, so in your, for you and your experience, like how many steps in a process should be given to you at one time to help you work effectively? How do you want your emails? Do you want one long email with bullets, or would you rather five separate emails about the different topics? It's really just about asking the questions, and these really are not just about accommodations. These are just best practices that if we all did as employers, 1 in 4 people have some form of neurodiversity, right? So I will talk to employers and they'll say, uh, I'll say, oh, what are you doing to support your neurodiverse individuals? And they'll say, well, we don't have any. And I'll say, well, how many employees do you have? And they say, oh, 10. And I said, well, then chances are you have someone who's neurodiverse. You just might not know it yet. And you might not be helping them reach their maximum potential because you haven't created the right supports.
So, what strengths do autistic and other neurodivergent employees often bring to the workplace that are overlooked?
Thinking outside the box, for one, creativity, especially, like our ADD individuals are so creative, but they might not go the traditional path to get there. So creativity is one. The other one is honesty, right? If things tend to be a little bit more black and white for people on the spectrum, not always, but they're tend to be. So therefore, if you're in a meeting with your leadership team and your boss puts a spreadsheet up on the screen and there's an error in it, why wouldn't you say something about that? A lot of us have this sort of social worry and social expectation like, oh, you don't dare call out your boss. But if there's an error in the spreadsheet, why wouldn't you? Right. So, unfortunately, for a lot of our neurodiverse individuals, they can often get labeled as rude or insensitive. But when you look at what they're saying, they're not. They maybe could have said it a little gentler. They maybe could have said it offline. But what they're saying is honest and true. So, why not say it?
How can the workplace make interviews or onboarding, which are a nightmare, or feedback better so they can ascend the corporate ladder or their workplace versus, hey, we're going to place you on a PIP because you're just not getting it?
Absolutely. So first of all, with the interview process, several years ago they started this thing called behavioral interviewing, and the theory was that they would ask these questions that weren't about the job, but they were about human behavior. And if they could answer them correctly, they would determine whether or not they could be a team player. So there's a lot of behavioral interviewing out there where they'll say, if you could be a fruit, what fruit would you be and why? My son, who just graduated college, literally went for an interview and they said, if you could have any animal's legs, which ones would you have and why? And so, again, for our neurodiverse individuals, as for many of us, you probably don't shine. You're like, first of all, I can't have an animal's legs. I can't be a fruit. So why would you ask me that question?
Right.
Right? So what we're learning now is whether or not you answered that question correctly will not determine whether or not you can go be a great engineer on the floor or go be a great, food person at a restaurant. Like it has nothing to do with it. So the first thing I would say is please stop the behavioral interviewing. It's very abstract and it's not going to help you determine whether they're a team player, right? So do some kind of portfolio assessment or some kind of trial to see if they could actually do the job. Have them spend a day. If it's a busy, chaotic, noisy environment, maybe they have to go sit on the floor, so to speak, for 2 hours and see if it's the kind of environment they could work in. So as far as, interviewing and that kind of thing, I could talk about that all day because it's not helping us. And we're missing so many valuable people because we're not asking the right questions.
I can only imagine if somebody asked my son that because he's already going to say, what the fuck does that have to do with the job?
Well, that's and that goes back to the truth comment, right? Like I'd be thinking it. I would just probably have enough sense to say, "Oh, I better not say that because I might not get back for a second interview." But it's the truth because you can't be a fruit, and so why ask the question? I mean, that's honestly the hard part about that. As far as onboarding, it really just comes down to Again, asking the right questions, setting up the right systems, making expectations clear. So there was a young man that I worked with who's now, I think, over 30, who worked for a large shipping company who claims to do neurodiversity well. And he was working in the where what he had to do is take packages and put them on the pallets to be picked up to take off to the shipping trucks. And he wasn't told the clear expectations. And so what he did was he focused on it more like Tetris and made sure he could get as many boxes on there precisely as he could. Well, he was then fired because he wasn't doing enough pallets. So if he had just been told, our expectation is that you get a new pallet packed every 15 minutes, or you get a new pallet packed with a minimum of 15 packages on it, he would have done it. But instead, he was marked as too slow. So it's, really as on your onboarding, just set the expectations correctly. And I hate to say it, but like don't be too nice. Don't say like slow and steady. It's like set up the expectations from the beginning so people know what to expect from it. Don't wait a month, wait 3 weeks so they can get used to it. Like if that's the expectation, be clear about it.
So, what does successful adulthood mean when we stop measuring everyone against the timeline?
It's a really great question. It's honestly to me about quality of life. What do you want to be doing with your everyday while balancing adulthood responsibilities? Because we'd all love to be doing a lot of things, but we have to pay our rent or mortgage. We have to pay the electricity bill, whatever it is, right? We have to limit the number of dogs we have in the apartment because that's what the lease says, right? Like all the things. So to me, it's really about quality of life while having to do what you got to do, right? It's about, do you do what you enjoy? There's a wonderful, I'd call him expert out there named Peter Gerhardt, and he focuses on like adult programming. And one of the things he talked about is if someone you're working with really likes something, maybe that doesn't become their job though, because I love ice cream. You have me go work in an ice cream shop, I'm probably not gonna love ice cream after day 3, maybe day 5, right? So, it's about accessing what you enjoy, accessing things that you can do well, so you're feeling successful every day. It's about having the social circles that you want to have, whether you're not maybe being pushed into a social circle that's too much or too little for you, right? And maybe you don't want a big social circle, and that's okay too. But it's really about accessing for you what your quality of life is.
So, how can families help young adults build these skills around money, transportation, advocacy, healthcare? Because it's so much that they're not taught in school that everybody expects them to learn, like trial and error. And they just don't learn that way.
They don't, and that's what I was literally gonna say is it's not a one and done. You know, it's not like you go to one financial support class or one financial planning class and now you know how to budget. Again, most people in their 20s are going to go to this one financial planning class and not necessarily know how to budget. So it's about creating resources. The challenge is how do you create resources for all different types of learners? Some of our, people with neurodiversity need a little bit more behavioral support, some don't. And the one thing I say specifically about autism is services for autism are like not scalable because our spectrum is so large that to just create that financial planning class, well, how many people are going to be in the class? Are there going to be additional support people to help create visual aids? Are we going to create a class for our level 1, 2, or 3 guys? It's complicated. I know a lot of the community colleges now are building more neurodiverse type programs, building more classes that are more neurodiverse friendly, more certificates that are out there. So I would say, even if you are or have a person on the spectrum who lives with you who's like a level 2, maybe a moderate, still look at the community colleges because they really are building more and more supports. There are now so many more supports online, so maybe it's an online platform where mom or dad or caregiver can sit down with them and walk through the class. but it's honestly about repetition. And I hate to say it, it's about making it visual, right? It's about not just talking about budget, it's about sitting down and maybe you're literally practicing with like a bowl of M&Ms and you're taking out 1,000 M&Ms for rent and you're taking out 300 M&Ms for electricity and you're working down to the bottom of the bowl and say, okay, you have 7 M&Ms left, to go out to restaurants. Is that going to work? Whether it's something as concrete as that or whether it's creating video models, but it's really, we have as use the expression, the flywheel is starting to turn, but we have a long way to go in creating more of these supports. But for our families, I would say, especially if you have an adolescent or young adult, like you got to do it. You got to expose them to it. Even if you're not sure if the class is going to be too hard, you try it. You never know.
So, how can a young adult ask for support while they're still feeling like the author of their own life?
So, one of the things that I'll say to especially like college students who are maybe trying to go to college and get a degree, I'll say, you know what, when you get that diploma, it's not going to list on there what your accommodations were. So if you need them, access them. No one cares. I mean, they might not do a good job with them, but you can't get if you don't ask. And so hopefully, one of the things that I say a lot, sort of the expression I like to use a lot is if we could all just give more grace. And I think our neurodivergent adults need to ask because then again, we don't know what to do if we don't know what they need, right? So, it doesn't mean less at all. It just means, hey, in order for me to reach my maximum potential, if I had this additional support, I can now have, if I have permission to be totally creative, if I have permission every 30 minutes in a meeting to stand up or use my fidget spinner, because if not, my brain is not going to focus, guess what? I will be your A plus employee.
Now, if an autistic listener wants to make their own community more inclusive, what is one concrete thing they can start this month?
Good question. I think again, it's about asking the questions, right? So maybe if it's an online community, it's okay. What's one more thing you need this community to do for you? What's something in the last month that irritated you about what we did? You know, were the meetings too long? Were they not organized enough? So a lot of what I do in my leadership training is I talk about Venn diagrams and having like that overlapping inner circle. And sometimes it's about finding that commonality, right? So it's again, it's not often complicated. It's about literally saying, okay, everyone post the show they're binge watching right now, right? So that we can create some kind of commonality amongst each other. And so, as if you're a part of a community and you don't see that there's overlapping commonalities, be intentional and try to find them.
Now, for the parents and caregivers listening, what's one shift they can make to support like greater independence without handholding?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's about the independence, right? So it's things like if your young adult still needs help with either dressing or picking out their outfit for the day based on the weather, or needs help in the bathroom. What visuals can you create? What environmental modifications can you create so that you don't have to be there? Unfortunately, right, there's a very high rate abuse in our world of special needs. And a lot of that is often because I will meet with a parent who has, say, a 19-year-old and they'll say, oh, they're independent in the bathroom. All I need to do is stand at the door and tell them what to do next. And I'll say, but then they're not independent because now eventually when they're living somewhere else, they're going to need someone else who's not their trusted parent to guide them through that. So my biggest passion is self-help skills, specifically in the bathroom, because legally in group homes and facilities, you can't have cameras in the bathrooms. And so when I say be independent in the bathroom, I mean be completely independent in the bathroom. So there's no reason that anyone else has to go in the bathroom. And I don't really care if they hit every single body part when they're in the shower. If they're in the shower, they're getting wet enough and clean enough that we don't need to worry about whether they're cleaning between their toes, which is again sometimes like what I'll see with a lot of the parents, like, well, they just need help to make sure. And I'm like, I'd much rather 'em be in the bathroom independently than worrying about, honestly, whether their shins are.
What is a simple way to start a conversation about like accommodations without forcing someone to disclose more than they really want to?
Tell me what your ideal work situation would look like. Is it organized and structured? Is it how long would meetings be in your ideal world? What kind of do you like a busy environment or a quiet environment? Do you in the past have you worn headphones because it's helpful to keep distractions out? Again, these are all things that if every employer could do for every employee, right? But it's really just about asking, but real and concrete questions, right? So, like I sort of talked around myself. The first thing I said was like, "What's the best kind of a work environment for you?" But be more specific, right? So, do you like to work in a room with one other person, five other people, zero other people, or 15 other people? And maybe it's, hey, you have to work in a room with 15 other people. Have you ever done that before? What worked well, what didn't work well. It's really just being about very clear and specific with the questions.
So you also host a podcast as
I
well,
do.
Shining Through Inspiring Voices of Autism, featuring autistic people, parents, educators. What conversations have changed or deepened your understanding of inclusion?
Wow, so many of them. It's actually absolutely been my most favorite thing to do because I've had so many people over the last 30 years that have so many things to share and they don't have the platform to do it, right? So I think probably from my self advocates, my people that are neurodivergent themselves, it's really when they talk about their frustrations with society and really how simple it would be if we just became more knowledgeable, like we could reduce everyone's stress by quite a bit. So, you know, I think it's just, I think a lot of the conversations have just, it's not complicated. A lot of them will just say, just ask me, right? Whether it's a teacher, an employer, a friend, they'll say, people will want to know whether to say autistic person or person with autism, and they'll say, just ask me. Like, so I think a lot of the conversations, as far as the self advocates go, it's just about asking. I think for our parents, especially of my parents and my adolescents and adults, hopefully what they're doing is giving parents of my newly diagnosed people hope because I've had even a lot of self-advocates on who literally their parents were told they will be nonverbal, they will be in a residential facility, and now they're on there because I mean, we just had one guest that went to USA Special Olympics games in the world of golf, and his parents were literally told he will be nonverbal, he will not do much of anything, right? So hopefully and I could say it, right? But I haven't walked it. But our parents of our 22-year-olds are saying, you can do this and have hope. And our self advocates, because I will ask them too, if there's a parent of a newly diagnosed child, what do you want them to know? And they will say, just believe in us, just give us a chance, just give us opportunity, and we'll do it.
What gives you hope when you think about the next generation of autistic teens and adults?
So I'm not in general a huge social media fan because unfortunately, right, I see probably a lot of negative, maybe more negative out there than good. But I do think it's creating a platform for our neurodivergent voices to A, be louder about what they need, but also B, to be able to access each other easier, maybe like in different parts of the state or different parts of the country. So I am hopeful that because I think with every new kind of generation of neurodivergent people, and again, with 1 in 4 being neurodivergent, I think we're gaining more confidence that it's okay to speak up, that it's okay to say to an employer, hey, I need a break every hour and a half. right? For whatever reason, because I need to go stim or whatever. A lot of the words are becoming much more normalized and familiar. I mean, back when I started in the field 30 years ago, and I would ask people in the audience I was speaking to, how many people of you know someone with autism? You might have one or two hands raised. Now you ask if I'm speaking even to a community organization, almost every hand raises. They either are, have someone directly in their life, know a neighbor, know a coworker's son, right? And so I think there's still a lot of misconceptions, but I think we're getting better about what neurodiversity is, what it's not, what autism is, what it's not. And so I'm more hopeful that it's going to continue to just be everyday conversation over time.
What is the difference between helping someone fit in versus helping them build a life where they're known, valued, and can thrive?
Really good question. So I think the first thing is really making sure you're understanding what that neurodivergent person wants, right? Again, whether it's interviewing them, whether it's doing picture choice making of like which thing would they rather be doing. It's a lot about what are they communicating to you as they're doing whatever you're exposing them to. I mean, I think it's very important for our parents of our adolescents and our adolescents themselves to be exposed to so many different things because, a lot of times they're not as exposed to different careers, even different leisure skills, different types of music. It can tend to be very much like, this is what I think they should be doing. So let's teach them how to do it. Right. And so um, I, I think where we need to go is we need to really make sure we're understanding their strengths and their challenges, their desires. I have one young adult who loves the Astros, um, and and can tell you he is what I would call like emerging verbal, like familiar people can understand it, but not everyone can. And he loves the Astros, and the mom would say he needs to go work for the Astros, and I would say yes, but he hates crowds and loud noise. So that's probably not gonna be his ideal job is and he loves greeting people. I mean, he will greet anyone who walks in the door, but now you make it for 20,000 people, might not be an ideal situation, right? And so I think it's about really listening if they can verbalize, but it's about listening to their behavior too. And when you take them places, do their eyes light up? Right? Do they tend to want to go to certain places, not because it's familiar and routine, but because they really enjoy it? And so I think it's about we can't expose our neurodivergent people to enough. Again, we just need to do more exposure because all of us tend to have our hobbies and our preferences, but our neurodivergent adults tend to have even more specific hobbies. But it doesn't mean that they can't go work and do something else and really be good at it.
Okay, final question.
Sure.
Where can listeners find Inspire Indies community resources and your podcast shining through?
Okay, so our inspireND.org, so Inspire Neurodiversity, inspireND.org. We're on all the social media platforms. And then the podcast, Shining Through, Inspiring Voices of Autism, is on all the major platforms.
Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on to my podcast.
Well, it was such a joy. Thank you so much for having me.